So, hello everyone, welcome to Skype a Scientist Live. Today we're going to be talking about wildlife forensics, which is really, really cool. But before we do, we want to address that we're not ignoring all of the awful things happening in our country right now. We really want to express support for Black scientists and Black people broadly in our country. And we want to give you all some suggestions of what to do with any power that you have. Even if you're a kid, you're an adult, doesn't matter. We all need to do something. And so one thing that you can all do if you're on Twitter or on Instagram, you can follow our friends at Black AF in STEM. They're a group of Black scientists from a broad range of disciplines, but they're all focusing on birds this week because it's Black Birders Week. Also, if you can donate to bail funds or other social justice groups, we really encourage that. Typically we plug to donate to us, but right now, not the time. Donate to somebody else. We'd really appreciate that. And also educate yourself. There's a lot of really, really great books for all sorts of different ages. For adults, How to Be Anti-Racist and also So You Want to Talk About Race are quite good. I've read So You Want to Talk About Race and How to Be Anti-Racist is in the mail for me at the moment. But for kids, there's also a good book, A Native American History of the United States. And there's one version for adults and one version for kids. And so that's one that you should check out as well. If you'd like a link to that, ask me in the Q&A and I can send you a link to that book as well. And that's about all we have for that. We just really want to show our support in any way that we can. We canceled trivia this week, but we're still doing these Q&As. And so in other news, things that we're doing this week with regard to our live streams, we have tomorrow, we're going to be doing all about how people relate and understand nature. So it's really more about how humans perceive nature. And then on Friday, we're going to be hearing all about paleontology, specifically focusing on Triceratops paleontology, which is going to be super, super cool. And in the meantime, we'll keep sharing stuff with you that you can do to help pass this week as well with regard to making our world less of an awful place. And so I'm going to stop sharing screen now so that we can make sure that Erin is nice and big for our ASL crew. Okay, and I'll send the link shortly for that book. At this point, let's introduce Madelaine Verbeek. Madi, do you want to introduce who you are, what you do, why you like it, and then we'll launch into questions?
Yeah. So my name is Madelaine Verbeek, Madi for short. I am a wildlife forensics scientist and conservation geneticist. And it sounds kind of like a really long title. Really, I fight or help to fight wildlife crime. So I have a couple of slides, if you all wouldn't mind, and that way I can show a little bit, well, what I do.
Great. Awesome. I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to share that now.
Fantastic. Let me see. Great. So, wildlife crime and wildlife forensics, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not as simple as just saying, well, wildlife, something bad happens, and that's it. It involves a myriad of different things, and it is worldwide, it's encompassing. Now, I do have a brief content warning since we are speaking about wildlife and what happens to wildlife. I'm going to have a frank talk about death and also pictures of dead wildlife just going forward. And then during the Q&A, I do have pelts, furs that I will be showing, and also bones that I will be showing, just as an FYI. So who am I? I've worn a couple of different hats, and I like to emphasize this because everybody thinks that becoming a scientist is like a one-track, like you knew what you were doing right away. So I have a BA in ecology, evolution, and biodiversity, and I studied human-animal coevolution. So tomorrow's Skype a Scientist Live is all about human-animal interactions, and I'm so looking forward to hearing about it. I got an AS degree in biotechnology, specializing in genetics, and I'm currently in my last semester as a wildlife forensics and conservation scientist at the University of Florida. Now, when I mentioned that I've had a couple of different jobs, all of them have kind of been around biology, but I've done everything from being a shark researcher to a dog trainer. I was a paid paleontologist for a while and also a beekeeper. So everything was kind of around biology, but forensics has now become my passion and my love. I'm actually able to apply everything that I've learned, and I can use it to change policy, to make a difference in the future for these animals and the people who live with them. So I get to explore the world. I get to do a whole bunch of different things every single day. It, of course, makes me happy. And I want to emphasize that if you find something that makes you happy, go for it. Decide to study it, put all of your effort into it. Plus, without having done all of this, I wouldn't actually be able to chat with Sarah here and Aaron and everyone else in the audience. I also want to emphasize, especially for my younger audience members, that failure is a part of the entire thing. You have to fail in order to succeed. You cannot go through life and not have anything that you have to overcome. So wildlife forensic science, now everybody is pretty much used to this kind of picture of wildlife forensic science. The rhinoceros here, of course, missing the horn on the front of the face, but it's a lot more than that. What we do is pretty much CSI, crime scene investigation, and yes, I put improvisation there, but crime scene investigation that happens to involve victims that are anybody but humans. And even then it gets a little bit wiggly, because if an animal attacks a human, or if a human does something and ends up being hurt by a plant or an animal, that's all a part of what I do. Also, the crime might be legal. And that seems weird, but it's all dependent on the species, the date, the time, how old the object was, the location. Any kind of extra variable that you can add to a crime might cause us to not be needed. So what exactly do I do? And it looks like my slide here moved. I attempt to find evidence. I attempt to find some sort of puzzle piece of that crime, and I'm going to try to link that puzzle piece using science to a victim, to a location, to a suspect. The list goes on. But all of this is based specifically on taking one piece of evidence and using science to apply it to a greater understanding. So it's pretty easy to look at these two pictures and say, all right, I got a polar bear. And I know that a polar bear doesn't live in, let's say, Antarctica. I know that it lives in the Arctic. So I can generally say that this living polar bear that was taken and, let's say, brought to the middle of nowhere Atlantic Ocean probably does not belong there. But if we start getting into the rugs, that starts to be iffy. You know, it still looks like a polar bear. It acts like a polar bear, but is it truthfully a polar bear? I know that polar bears come from a very specific location, but what happens when we start talking about animals that are everywhere, at least everywhere throughout the central part of the world here? Here we have a purse. Now this purse has been treated, dyed, colored, completely modified from its original structure. Is it fake leather that you can see on that top right there? Is it farmed versus captive versus out in the wild caught? We don't know. I cannot look at this purse and tell you whether or not it's the caiman, which is on the lower right-hand side, which is illegal here in the United States, or if it's the American alligator, which is on the top left. That's legal. That's where we start to come in. So we involve a whole bunch of different things, and this is a short list, and I'm even going to shorten this list even more as we go along, but it encompasses a ton of different things, ton of different aspects. Now again, I'm bringing back the rhino because we Obviously, when we think about wildlife crime, we think of the rhinoceros or the elephant, these gigantic megafauna who are being decimated, and they really are, and it's horrible. But oftentimes we forget other animals that are impacted and other wildlife. So wildlife crime is the fourth largest crime in the entire world. It is worth billions of dollars, and the actual estimation is hard to quantify. That's because this money and these things, these wildlife bits and pieces, they are nearly impossible to find in small quantities. Once they are found, it's nearly impossible to prosecute because you can't say whether or not something was there. It's hard to link all of those evidence pieces together to form the puzzle. And then finally, if someone actually is caught, actually prosecuted, the penalties are minimal, just minimal. Now, this is partially because the corruption within the governments and the people, or the lack of care. They see these objects as, or animals and plants as objects. Now, that does not mean that the people who end up being a part of the wildlife crime and the demands that come from it, that does not mean that they're bad people. Some people have to rely on various forms of wildlife crime in order to sustain their living, in order to live in general, to it's a hard fine line to walk, and we have to be careful when we talk about these objects and these people that are involved. It's not always as negative of a crime as we see it from our picture. We have to look at the entire globe, the entire encompassing idea. So of course we know the pangolin. The pangolin is that little scaled creature there, the most trafficked animal in the entire world right now. But down there you see the redwood. The redwood is an endangered species, but constantly chopped down and used to make, well, really pretty furniture. It's nearly impossible to tell redwood after it's treated apart from other hardwoods. So again, that's where we come in. So I won't get into the nitty gritty too much. Just know that this is a global concern. And it is something that we have to be aware of, that there are thousands of animals and plants and tons of objects, physical tons of objects that are being moved all throughout the world for various different reasons. Now, you might ask, why do you care? And I guess I can kind of boil it down to a couple of different things. Whoop. So if you don't care about it, think of it that you cannot be healthy without having a healthy ecosystem around you, without having a healthy environment. You cannot eat and drink and breathe without some sort of ecological thing around you. When these crimes are being committed, they are also introducing billions of dollars into other organized crime. It's a quick and easy moneymaker for these crime syndicates. Again, low prosecution rates. When you are caught, you get off pretty easy, but you make a ton of money. And finally, if that's not good for you, if that's not getting you anywhere, I'll just say this, that we only have one Earth. There's only a finite amount of what we have here. This is the only little pale blue dot that we are aware of. And yes, of course, you can say that maybe in the future we might be able to find something. This is the opportunity in our time to fix what we have, to stop ignoring it, that saying that we can find better is going to fix it. It's not. We need to take the time right now to do it. So I can either go into other things and show some stuff, or we can go to the Q&A because I already saw some questions.
Let's do one question and then one show and tell. Do you want to do it that way? Because we definitely want to see what you have to offer. We're very excited about that. Okay, so the first question is, what was your most favorite crime you've ever solved, or what has impacted you the most?
Oh, goodness. Well, I should say that since I am still in school, my applications are going to be lesser than an actual practicing forensic scientist. That being said, I just wrapped up a project on a little cactus called Hericea aboriginum, and it's a cactus that is endemic here to Florida. And the species is hotly debated. And we can go into kind of the debate of the species versus subspecies, because that gets really technical and fun. This species of cactus, when we started the project, there were around 200, 300 individuals. When we finished the project, as much as we know, there were around 50. This cactus is being decimated. It likes to grow on the beach. It likes to be exactly where humans like to be, and it's a tiny cactus. You don't even think about it. But that is where that policy, that extra work into the genetics to figure out what this thing is and why it's important for the ecosystem. That way we can have better policy. I know it's not necessarily an application, but in a roundabout way, it is.
Sounds good. The next question is, what makes animals legal or illegal?
Oh, great question. Okay. This is a hard one to answer just because it is all dependent on a lot of those different things. If let's break it down. If you are interested in hunting or having an object that comes from a wild organism, a plant, a rock, a tree, an animal, the best place to go to is to look up your local fish and wildlife. And on that fish and wildlife website, they will be able to break it down by state. My state in Florida is a little bit more relaxed on some things than it probably should be, comparatively to other locations. So in California, you are absolutely not to own or possess any sort of, it gets wiggly, but you have feathered birds. So the Migratory Species Act of 1992 states that you are not allowed at all to have any sort of feathers. And that's in California. Here in Florida, you're not allowed to have migratory bird feathers, but you're allowed to have turkey, and you're allowed to have some other species. So if you want to possess an object, or if you're interested in looking to gather a collection for yourself, look at your local and state websites.
Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Do you want to show us one of your objects?
Sure. So we were talking about this species versus subspecies.
Right.
And the problem that it gets kind of hard to tell sometimes and hard to figure out which is which is because we are starting to find animals creating hybrids. So a hybrid is an individual, an animal that ended up going from its species and either finding a subpopulation to mate with, and that's where it gets kind of weird. You see, we're finding creatures that are going from their original states, such as this coyote, and being able to mate with dogs. So we have a coy dog here. So coyote, coy dog. Physically, the furs look an awful lot alike. Their colors are awful lot alike. But here we can see these long, thicker hairs, these thicker furs on top. Also, we have a shaggier face, a more prominent brow. So these are all things that are going to be coming up while we're making these policies and while we're trying to figure out the science, that it's going to be hard to catch up on because these animals are around right now. Is it legal for us to hunt maybe a coyote wolf hybrid? Or what about a wolf dog hybrid? Are we allowed to do so? Is it only the pure animal that we're allowed to have? Well, how can we tell from a distance? These two didn't look much different from a distance. So how do we tell? This is where that policy and that genetics specifically need to work hand in hand. We need to be able to define what exactly a subspecies is, what the protocols and protections for those subspecies are, and also morphologically, how we can tell them apart from a distance.
Wow, that seems so complicated but cool. Like you're on like the cutting edge of animals like getting it together. That's so cool. Um,
Yeah.
all right, the next is from Kaylee, age 4. She wants to know what's your favorite thing to explore?
Oh, oh, wow, that's a great question. Um, Um, Everything. I so as like one of my other jobs, I work for a natural history museum, and I love what natural history museums have that we can use as scientists and that we can use as educators. So wherever I travel, I find not only a new public land to go to, if at all possible, a national park to check those off the list, but I look for a very specific new land to explore, and I look for a natural history museum to check out. When you combine those two, you start getting a better picture of the ecology of well, everything, even the native people who lived there before us. All of that can be shown by the animals and the plants that are still around today.
Awesome. The next question is, what inspired you to choose this career?
A great question. Has anyone watched Bones? I'm sure some people have. Now, I know this sounds a little bit weird, like you watched a show about bones and now you're a forensic scientist. But if the interest sparks and if you have fun with it, pursue it. So Kathy Reichs here, she wrote the Bones kind of, well, not only the books, but part of the actual movie or the show. And her books have always been fun mystery novels. And I always liked mystery novels. Bones came out. I really liked it too. But I decided to go the normal route through biology. But I kept getting pulled back to policy and application on how to fix these problems. All of a sudden, I was able to marry my love of traditional biology with my interest in, and excitement about the legal system. And together, you get wildlife forensics.
Very cool. Milo, age 9, and Dexter, age 8, want to know, is this work sometimes sad?
Yeah, I mean, you can't do this work and not have feelings and not have emotions. And I think that's all of conservation. We stare at extinction in the eye every single day. It goes to bed with us and it wakes us up in the morning, because if we don't do the job right, something might forever change. But that does not mean that you shouldn't do it. Doing this work is fulfilling because we are making a difference. Not only am I making a difference for my local ecosystem, but that ecosystem radiates out. All of Florida's diversity is dependent on all of the critters and all of the wildlife that is alive today, and then in future generations. If I don't have children, if I don't have any of these species, then others will be impacted because I was able to help, even just a little bit. And it's not just me, it's all of conservation biology, all of conservation itself. It's a collective organization, it's a collective effort for us to make the world just a little bit better.
That's really powerful. Thank you. Teddy and Amelia would like to know, do you think that the people are taking advantage of the pandemic to get illegal organisms right now?
That is a fantastic question, because sadly, we know this answer already. There is a part of when you go and you visit a different location, and let's say you go out and you take a safari in the middle of Africa, let's say Botswana. You are paying the local people in order to go out and to experience their wildlife and experience their ecosystems. When that money is no longer coming in, there are less people physically around. And sadly, that means that poachers have been seen to have an upswing in the amount of events that have happened, specifically with rhinoceros and specifically in Botswana since the pandemic. Ecotourism is it can be a wiggly problem. The money can go to people and help the local people, but there is also some concerns about the treatment and the ethics behind giving money to interact with species. Without that money, the people either might have to rely on using the wildlife for other factors in order to, again, be sustained, or again, the physical amount of people that aren't physically there, it's going to attract people to do bad things.
Yeah. Thank you. Grant, or Grayson, age 9, would like to know, of all of your previous jobs, you said you had a bunch of different jobs, which one was your favorite?
Oh, well, I can say that I'm looking forward to the hopeful possible future of maybe one day becoming an actual laboratory forensic scientist. So far, this last year that I've been working, actually 2 years now that I've been working with that cactus, has been interesting because I'm actually making policy changes. I love my work in the lab, but it's so cool to be able to apply my lab work and actually do something with it. If I could somehow find a job where I'm able to be in the lab and be dirty in that context, and then also be out in the wild and be dirty in that context, I'd be pretty happy. Sadly, the pandemic actually stopped me from fulfilling this dream. I was supposed to be in Botswana and South Africa right now. Now, of course, we can't predict the future. Things happen. Hopefully, the project and the program will still be there next year. If not, I'll find something else to get my hands in.
I'm sure there's a lot of things that would love to have your expertise and energy working toward. That's great. I'm supposed to be in Hawaii right now collecting squid, but oh well.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Oh well.
Well, yeah.
The next question is, how do you evaluate success in your career? Like in terms of the projects that you're approaching?
Great question. So part of the work that I do is in genetics. And when we talk about genetics, I'm talking about taking bits and pieces of an animal, physically removing part of the object, even in a plant, and getting the entire, or at least parts of the genetic, the genomes that make up that animal. The more that we do this, the better our statistics look. And that's because we have physically more independent objects. Each of us have a very small difference between our DNA, but that's a major difference when we're talking about criminalistics. So every single time I get an individual, I'm able to add that to our database. And now we are able to start looking at locations. We're starting to be able to look at the mix of these species and how different these mixes are. Is this 50-50, 75-25, all that. Each of those things, even though it does not feel like a direct success right away, each of those little things, that's going to contribute to our ability to fight wildlife crime in the future. I can then say that this animal came from this animal that I found out in the wild, and I found the hair of someone who was there, a human who was there. Statistically speaking, there is 1 in a billion chance that this animal and that animal are the same. So statistically, these two are pretty much identical. Without each of those little bits and pieces of DNA, we can't say those statistics are, we're not as sure of our connections. And again, even though it's an odd success, each of those little things does make a difference.
Totally. Awesome. Thank you. The next question is from Rania Gallant, which is who is one of Erin's nibblings. So how long have you been a scientist?
I'm one of those people that say that as long as you are exploring the world, and as long as you are questioning things around you, and as long as you enjoy even maybe not even going outside, but if you're looking at your carpet fibers and you're wondering what they're made out of, if you're one of those people who like to splash in the bath as a kid and you were watching the water trickle on the side of the tub, you're a scientist. So by my definition, I guess I've always been one. And the fact that you all being here and chatting with me and hearing me, it means that you're curious. This is a weird subject. So it means that you're curious. So I would classify all of you as scientists as well.
That's actually a very common answer that we get from scientists on our live streams. Like, we're
Yay.
all scientists. So like, yeah, that's something that we're really trying to drive home, that as long as you're curious and, you know, examining your world, you're a scientist. That's really
Exactly.
great. The next question is, what would you say to an elementary student who wants to pursue a career in conservation?
Read a whole lot. And not just read about the things that are easy to read about. So it's easy to get a picture book and memorize every single animal out there. I mean, I've done that. But also read about the people that interact with these animals and these plants. Read history. I'm not the biggest fan of history, but history is important when we understand how certain species move from one place to another. Read about paleontology and where these species came from and whether or not they were even around just 10,000 years ago. We have species here that are, of course, no longer around, but we have bits and pieces that are still applicable today. So I have 2 pieces of ivory, but do not worry, not actual, well, modern day elephant ivory. This is either mastodon or mammoth.
Whoa.
So these elephants lived here up until about 10,000 years ago. These critters were still walking around on Earth during the time of the Egyptians. And of course, as they grow, and of course, as they die, they leave bits and pieces behind. So these objects were found in a river here in Florida. So we know that these elephants were walking around. And I know that this is ivory because you probably won't be able to see it. But do you see those little striation marks?
Yeah, totally.
So those are called Schreger lines, and Schreger lines are seen in elephant ivory today. And depending on the kind of size of the lines and how thick they are and the angles of the cross-hatching, you either have modern day elephant or paleo elephants.
Whoa.
So, yeah. So knowing that we had those elephants here in Florida and knowing that they were around during even at the kind of start of this modern age, that's going to be useful to me and conservation in general.
That's great. Awesome. The next question, we've got 7 minutes yet left, so I'm trying to get through as many questions as possible here. What changes have you observed in wildlife while working on this?
So, well, such changes like
that.
having
Yeah, there's
these
a good one.
animals come around. And this one actually, so all of the objects that I'm sharing today are from my personal collection, and they are either bought from estate sales or me. I worked on them. So, and I have a trapper's license here in Florida, which denotes allowing me to have some of these animals. And so that's a major change. That's a big change. But some other cool changes. So here's a pig. And I can tell you it's a pig. But I found this pig as a roadkill pig, decided to work it up a little bit, and I found something interesting. So you see that hole right there?
Yeah.
That's not a hole that should be there, but something interesting. The bone around it is remodeling. It's growing. It survived whatever did this to it enough for it to almost close. So
Whoa.
seeing those physical changes while working on these animals, it gives you a whole new appreciation of what they're able to handle, what they're able to deal with. I
Right.
know I wouldn't be, I'd be pretty sad with that.
For sure. That's wild. Awesome. The next question is, how can we be responsible consumers?
This is probably a longer answer than, and I know that it's going to be the best thing to do is to look for local. And that's going to be the probably the easiest, and not only easiest for you to do, but also easiest to have a larger impact. If you can find someone local who has honey and has bees, get that honey from that local person. If you can find even beef, chicken, pork, rabbit, all of that is grown locally around you, as well as plants, vegetables, and fruit. It's not as easy as going to your grocery store down the street whenever you would like, but it will make a larger difference in terms of, well, not only your little ecosystem, but the larger, greater footprint that all of that movement of food has all throughout the world.
Awesome. That wasn't too long of an answer. That was a great answer.
Awesome.
Way to go. All right. Let's see. Are there any international laws that apply to trafficking or anything like this?
Oh, a ton. So CITES, and I always butcher the name. It's pretty much the International Trade Society of Animals and Plants. And that is the largest kind of umbrella. So that says and sets all of the other little things that we have to follow. So under CITES, you are allowed to move mountain lion parts.
Huh.
However, locally, Florida, we have a specific subspecies of cougar, which is endangered. So a Florida cougar is not allowed to be moved, but a Texas cougar can. So having these differences and having these, they're small, they're minimal. However, if you overstep the boundary, you start to have some trouble with the law. So again, looking up those local organizations, local fish and wildlife, to tell you whether or not you can have them. And then, of course, looking at the international ones to see just kind of how odd some things are allowed to be moved around the world.
Right. Is that a real skull?
Yeah, this is cougar.
Wow. It's so
Texas.
perfect looking and
Texas.
clean. Wow.
Yes, this one was purchased from a taxidermist out
Yeah,
there.
it's beautifully, beautifully done. So cool. Okay, let's see. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us from your collection?
Yeah. So one of the cool things that I like bones aside from genetics. One of the cooler things that I've learned by doing this is how to age objects, and that different ages appear on different parts of the body. So here we have a growth plate. So here, this is the epiphyses, so that's where your joint would be. And here's the long bone, so the rest of the arm. And that's your growth plate. So this will continue to grow longer and longer, and your body begins to grow farther, longer. And then this eventually will calcify over. And that's where you get the hardness in your bones. But this critter ended up dying young. This was not fused. The same goes for looking at teeth.
Oh, who are we looking at here?
This is a dog, so
Oh.
prominent forehead here, so a coyote.
Cool.
Less prominent,
Uh-huh.
longer, more tapered,
Uh-huh.
wider,
Uh-huh.
giant eye sockets to look at you and ask for treats. And right here, you see those little teeth growing in?
Yeah.
So this was a puppy.
Oh, poor guy.
So this puppy here had or was growing in its secondary teeth. So depending on the animal, you get your secondary teeth in different stages, different locations, but it's really easy to see that second canine there. This being the baby,
Cool.
that being the adult tooth.
Wow. So cool. Awesome. So I can't believe this, but we've been talking for 40 minutes. I
Already?
just started, but we've been, wow, time flies when you're talking about cool animals. So, all right, before we wrap up, we always ask everybody the same two questions. The first question is, what's something that you wish everybody in the world knew related to your area of expertise? And the second question is, what's something that you wish everybody in the world knew about literally anything? It can be as small or broad and significant as you'd like.
Related to my area, you might be surprised at how easy it is to interact with wildlife objects that are illegal. Since these objects are moved casually, since these objects can be historically within your family for generations, it can be deceivingly easy to go about your day and not recognize and not realize. Things like alligator paws are no big deal here in Florida. You can get them on a back scratcher. That's how common they are. But you need to do your digging. Did this come from a wild animal? Did it come from a farmed animal? You don't know. And I don't have a piece of paper to tell me.
Right.
It's very easy to go about your day and not even take a double look at something like that.
Right.
As for in general, everything is connected. Everything. Every breath that you take is connected to the tree that is next to you, or I should say the algae that is growing in the, on the side of the road that's next to you. Everything is connected. Everything that you do, touch, interact with, all. So be mindful of how you go about your everyday. If you can limit certain interactions, things like smashing your trash into one trash bag instead of having multiple trash bags, that extra little plastic, it makes a difference. Sharing, carpooling, or taking public transportation. If you can't do that, finding other ways that you can make these small changes, it makes a large impact. Now, of course, this is not taking away from the fact that a large part of our problems come from corporations and larger organizations. So this is not just on you to fix the world, it's on you to do what you can with the resources that you have in order to make smaller impacts, if at all possible.
Absolutely. Great advice. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up?
I have an Instagram. I have actually here, if you don't mind, I'll quickly share.
Go for it.
So I have all the way down here. Where'd you go? I know I had too much stuff to talk about, too much fun.
So much cool stuff.
There we go. So I have social media, so on Twitter and Instagram. My website hopefully will come out soon. When I was first working on this, I had a GoFundMe that I was going to plug. However, my GoFundMe will be up for the next year because I will eventually go to Africa. During this week and the subsequent weeks that we are currently what is happening right now, that money needs to go to better, bigger and better things. So ignore the GoFundMe and apply your money and resources and any extra that you can give, apply it to things that are happening currently right now.
Great.
And of course, I gotta plug Black Birders Week. Today, we have Ask a Black Birder. Tonight, I already have my question. I hope you all do too.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this cool information with us. And thank you for plugging Black Birders Week, because I was about to do the same, which is just wonderful. So to wrap up, if anybody joined us late, we have some suggestions for what you can do to be helpful, broader than just science, because science relies on everyone being able to feel safe and healthy in their lives. And that, of course, includes Black people. And we really want to make sure that we're voicing support for Black Lives Matter and all of the protests happening around the country. And so just within our little scientific community, you can follow Black AF in STEM. They are a bunch of different Black scientists banding together to talk about issues that are important to them and affect them specifically, and also to elevate voices among their group. You can also donate to bail funds like Philly Bail Fund. That's our local one, but like whatever one's local to you is good. And there's a lot of other social justice organizations that are really important. One that I was checking out today is called Campaign Zero. They're a group that is really doing research to understand what we can do legislatively to decrease violence by the police against Black people. And so we want to support that and check that out. There's a lot of cool data that they've put together. And also some books that you can check out that we recommend are How to Be Anti-Racist and So You Want to Talk About Race. You can check out in the Q&A. I also included a link specifically all about Native American history for kids. There's a version for adults and version for kids. And so that's a good one if these two books are a little bit high level for the kids in your family. We hope that you'll support these efforts. We hope that you're thinking about this stuff today and weeks going forward, months going forward. And we'll be sure to talk about it at Skype a Scientist as well. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking about how people perceive wildlife. And on Friday, we're going to be talking about paleontology of Triceratops. This 3-week period, all of the scientists that we're highlighting are members of the LGBTQIA community. And so we're partnered up with a group called Noble Step. They are a professional society that advocates for and is a group of LGBTQIA people. And so we're partnered up with them. We're really, really happy that they're grouped with us to do some good work during this 3-week period. We hope to see you all tomorrow. We hope you all feel empowered to make our world a better place. And again, Maddie, thank you for spending the time to talk with us today. And Erin, thank you for taking the time to sign with us.
Thank you, Erin.
All right, we'll see y'all tomorrow.
Bye.